Everyone, I am really pleased to see such a large gathering of people showing such interest in this workshop, The Business of Writing. So on behalf of the Department of Community and Cultural Affairs, I thank you for coming out and supporting us. And now I would like to introduce our Minister, the Honorable Dale Butler, JPMP, Minister of Cultural and Social Rehabilitation. I was about to say Community and Cultural Affairs, but he's Minister of Culture and Social Rehabilitation. Would you please join with me by welcoming me?
Thank you. You seem so far away. I'd like to acknowledge all of those who publish authors. Have a book out. Where are you? Stand up. One, just one, 2, 3, 4. And tell us what you publish.
Curriculum, poetry, other literature.
And your name?
Melody Masheri Benhutton.
Right, thank you. You work in the educational system in the African and the ASHE program. Senior historian in Bermuda. Every book you've written. Come on. Dr. Busby needs to know who you are. Step to the plate.
All right. My name is Margaret Busby, and I've written a number of books. One of which is called Freedom Fighters from Mount to Mazumbo. That's one that I wrote.
And recently a hardback on the history of the BIU.
Yes, but what I'd like to say is that I have written and had published a number of books.
Yes.
Books. You'll get, if you buy any one of them, you'll be able to do all of them.
Yes, but we're doing this for the benefit of Dr. Busby, including the story of Hakeem, including heroines in the medical profession, and a long-term writer for the now-defunct Recorder and editor, and still a prolific writer who has articles in the Mid-Ocean on a regular basis. Okay, you know him, but some of the others might not. Thank you. And at the back.
Darren Lowe, author of Bermuda Fun Book, Jonah the Great Fish, The Flood, the Keisha stories, and
Thank you. Mr. Emery?
Yes, Llewellyn Emery, author of Nothing But a Pond Dog, Fires of Pembroke, and sometime back, Cricket the Offside.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Busby, we also have?
Dr. Lois Burgess, 48H, Life in the 40s in Bermuda, biography of Charles Boyd Tucker, artist, and Fame Magazine.
Right, thank you. Last but not least.
Diane Matthews, and I have written 2 books, Meditations to Encourage Your Soul and Meditations to Encourage Your Soul, a continuation. I also write currently for the Bermuda Sun. I do a short meditation in the Bermuda Sun every other week.
Thank you. Let's give our authors, published authors, a hand. I thought it was important for our guest speaker to know what has already been achieved on the island, and the fact that everyone in this room has every book that has been mentioned at home. Because part of our tradition is to purchase a book, if it is Bermudian, to purchase it, to read it, digest it, use it, and to pass it on to our children. That was the philosophy that I was brought up under. Tonight's lecture is on the business of writing. And as the minister responsible for the Department of Community and Cultural Affairs, I am delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Margaret Busby, also known as Nana Akua Akan, to our shores. I am looking forward to the information that Dr. Busby will be sharing with us tonight as she broadens our perspective on publishing. As you will appreciate upon our introduction of Dr. Busby, she is ideally suited to give this talk, since in addition to numerous other accomplishments and awards, she became the United Kingdom's youngest and first black woman book publisher when she co-founded Allison and Busby in the 1960s. She has dedicated much of her life to the promotion of writings of Africa and the African diaspora, and has a keen appreciation for the challenges that face writers from small island nations. And she would be delighted if someone took this seat at the front. It's a $100 seat reserved just for you. And I think we have another one in that row. Is there another one in the second row? And I know some of those strong-minded, another one where that gentleman has his hand up, don't give my seat away. And I know some of those strong gentlemen at the back are going to get some chairs for the others. No? Thank you. This talk builds upon the Department of Community and Cultural Affairs' long-term promotion of the literary arts as demonstrated with the publication of the Bermuda Anthology of Poetry in 2006, the Writer-in-Residence workshops in 2007, and the Bermuda Literary Awards in 2008. Those are some recent accomplishments, to name just a few. It is my hope that this talk will assist our writers and aspiring writers to work diligently towards producing quality materials for Bermuda and beyond. Why? Are you aware that the Premier last year constituted a committee led by Dr. Muriel Smith that examined all local books to see how they would fit into the curriculum and came up with a recommended book list. And that recommended book list will assist authors with purchases. So that was a major step. It is my hope that this talk will assist you. In closing, I would like to thank the Bermuda College, particularly Mrs. Angela Berry. Where are you? Let's give her a hand anyway. Yeah. So we've acknowledged her, we've acknowledged our local writers for collaborating with the Department of Community and Cultural Affairs. And this initiative is an important initiative, and I hope it will establish a firm foundation for future lectures and workshops. Thank you.
Minister, we thank you for your support. As always, you've been a champion for culture and the literary and the performing arts in Bermuda, and we are most appreciative of all of the support that you provide, not only the department, but also the entire country of Bermuda in terms of the promotion of culture, our traditions, and everything that speaks heritage to Bermuda. I am going to now share with you portions of Dr. Busby's very impressive and extensive resume. Margaret Busby, also Nana Akua Akana, was born in Ghana and was educated in Britain, earning an honors English degree from London University. On graduating in the 1960s, she became the UK's, United Kingdom's, youngest and first black woman book publisher when she co-founded Allison and Busby, of which she was the editorial director for 20 years, producing hundreds of titles in an international list of fiction, nonfiction, poetry, and children's books. She was subsequently appointed editorial director of EarthScan until 1990, publishing classics of the post-colonial world by authors such as Han Suyuan, Frantz Fanon, Alfred Memini, among others. She has since worked as writer, journalist, editor, critic, consultant, reviewer, and broadcaster on radio and television. Front Row, Night Waves, Open Book, Channel 4 television interview with Toni Morrison, etc. Her many abridgments and dramatizations for BBC Radio 4 include work by Jean Rhys, the work entitled Wide Sargasso Sea, work by Wale Soyinka entitled Akaye, Timothy Moe, his work, The Monkey King, among others. Her radio play, Minty Alley, produced by Pam Fraser Solomon, won a 1999 Race in the Media Award from the Commission for Racial Equality. Publications for which she has written include The Guardian, Independent, Observer, Sunday Times, Literary Review, New Statesman, New Society, West Africa, Africa Forum, Race Today, Red Pepper, South, Third World Quarterly, the Times Literary Supplement, and the Times Educational Supplement. In October 1989, she co-edited with Ian Mays a special African edition of Guardian Weekend, with contributions from the likes of people such as Chinua Achebe, Ben Okira, Wale Soyinka, Victoria Breton, etc. She has judged many literary awards, such as Orange Award, King Prize for African Writing, Guardian Heinemann African Short Story Competition, Commonwealth Broadcasting Association Contest, Saga Prize, Arts Council, Independent Foreign Fiction Prize, and has served on the boards of numerous organizations, including the Africa Center, Royal Literary Fund, International Book Fair of Radical Black and Third World Books, Africa 95, PanFest, International Center for African Music and Dance, that's in Ghana, Minority Arts Advisory Service, Black Theater Cooperative, African and Caribbean Music Circuit, Africa Remembrance Day, the Organization of Women Writers of Africa, and the Hackney Empire. In 2004, she gave the keynote address at the Bath Literature Festival, and she has chaired and spoken at many conferences, seminars in the United Kingdom and abroad. She gave the keynote address 50 Years of Radical Black Publishing in Britain at the second Huntley Archives Conference in February 2007 at London Metropolitan Archives. She is patron of Independent Black Publishers Group, and in the 1980s, she was a founder of GAP, not the clothing store, Greater Access to Publishing, a group campaigning for diversity in the UK publishing workforce, and is now on the steering committee of the Arts Council Diversity in Publishing Initiative. Among books to which she has been a contributor are, and I'll just name a few, Colors of a New Day, writing for South Africa, Mothers by Daughters, The Oxford Companion to the 20th Century Literature in English, Daughters of Africa, an international anthology of works and writings by women of African descent from the ancient Egyptian to the present. She also co-edited C.L.R. James' 80th birthday lectures. Her involvement with the performing arts includes script writing. It also includes such things as touring the UK during the spring of 2001 and spring of 2002, in addition to having performances in Ghana in December 2001 from one of the productions that she wrote the script for. Her 5-part BBC Radio 4 Woman's Hour drama serial, Yai Asat, I'm sorry, I know I haven't pronounced this correctly, Asante Wa, Yai Asante Wa, October 2003, drew on the same historical subject matter. In October 2007, her play, An African Cargo, was showcased by Nitro Theatre Company at the Greenwich Theatre. Honors she has received include the Society of Young Publishers Award, 1970, the Pandora Award, 1993, from Women in Publishing, an Excel Lifetime Achievement Award, 1997, from The Right Thing. In 1998, she was made an honorary member of the African American sorority Alpha Kappa Alpha. In 1999, she was installed in Ghana as Nana Akua Akanai of Asafo Company No. 1 in Cape Coast. She was awarded an honorary doctorate of the Open University at Ely Cathedral in 2004 and made an officer of the Order of the British Empire in the Queen's New Year's Honours List of 2006 for services to literature and to publishing. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Margaret Busby, Nana Akua Akana. That is awesome. That is awesome.
That is embarrassing. Good afternoon. Good evening, everybody. Sorry about that taking up so much time. And I'm going to apologize because I was going to come with my lecture notes all neatly printed out, but unfortunately the printer in the hotel wasn't working, and so I'm going to speak from memory, and I expect you're going to help me out with some contributions from the floor. So first of all, I want to thank the Minister, the Department of Culture, Bermuda College, Angela Barry, for giving me the opportunity to be here in Bermuda for the first time. I hope it's not going to be the last time. And for being able to get a taste of what's going on here in the world of literature, writing and publishing. As you've heard, my background goes back to the 60s in terms of publishing, and I know most of you are probably here because you want to know about writing. The Minister asked you to put up your hands if you'd written any books. Has anybody here published any books? Ah, a couple. Okay, very good. Because I think that the business of writing and publishing are intimately linked. What is publishing? Well, publishing, in the simplest way, is making something public. I mean, I often say to people, if you photocopy something half a dozen times, you're a publisher. Now, what do writers want to do? They want their words, their work to be read by as many people as possible. So the two are linked. You can't have one without the other. So I think it is important for people, as well as wanting to be involved with the writing side, to be very aware that there's a publishing side as well to consider. And it doesn't have to be a high-powered way of going about things. You can start from where you are, and there are many well-known writers who have combined being involved in the world of publishing with writing themselves. Toni Morrison, who we all know is a Nobel Prize winner, was also an editor in a publishing company, Random House. Alice Walker had her own publishing company. There are publishers and writers and publishers. You heard all the things I've done. I mean, I don't think it makes me sound extremely old to have done all those things. But there was a reference to a keynote address I gave last year on 50 years of radical black publishing in Britain. And I'll read, there were one or two points I picked up there to show that there's a tradition, certainly among black writers, of being involved in producing the works themselves. Let me find some of the examples I gave. In 1789, Olaudah Equiano published his autobiography, The Interesting Narrative of the Life of Olaudah Equiano, or Gustavus Vassa the African, written by himself, in which he gives a dramatic account of having been stolen from Africa at the age of 11, shipped to the West Indies, taken to Virginia, and sold to a British Navy lieutenant, then back into bondage in the West Indies. And he used his entrepreneurial skills to amass enough money to buy his freedom in 1766. He eventually settled in London and married an Englishwoman. Now, apparently, he more or less self-published his autobiography, retaining the copyright, which is a risky and unusual move when most books didn't even make it into a second edition. And he put together a list of well-connected and influential subscribers who agreed to buy copies. And it was submitted to Parliament as documentary evidence when the bill for the abolition of the slave trade was being debated in 1792. The book was a success. and made Equiano a wealthy man. And now, I always tell most people who want to be writers, don't become a writer if you think it's going to make you rich and famous, because it probably isn't. In other words, don't give up the day job. But Equiano, back in the 18th century, managed to somehow sell enough of his books so that he could leave quite a considerable estate to his daughter when he died in 1797. Now, early in the 19th century, Africans in Britain have spoken. Since then, Africans in Britain have spoken for themselves through print. There was a man called Robert Wedderburn, who was born in 1762 in Jamaica, and he was a former captive who turned to publishing after gaining his freedom. He came to Britain in 1778 and produced an anti-slavery paper in 1817, which is called A Forlorn Hope, or A Call to the Supine to Rouse from Indolence and Assert Public Rights. In the first edition, he argued that the journal would establish something in the shape of a free press. Now, Wedderburn was tried for sedition in 1820, and with many working-class radicals, he spent time in prison for challenging the ideas of the ruling class. So, I mean, that's an example of how writing and publishing actually can have an effect on the social situation. In October, more recently, a century or two later, October 1901, Henry Sylvester Williams, who was one of the main organisers of the first Pan-African Conference held in London in 1900, at which my grandfather was a delegate, actually, he published a short-lived publication called Pan-African. As he stated in the first issue, it was designed to spread information concerning the interests of the African and his descendants in the British Empire, and to be the mouthpiece of the millions of Africans and their descendants. Declaring that little or nothing is known of the educated British Negro, the editorial in that issue expressed the conviction that no other but a Negro can represent the Negro. Now, that's a theme of people representing themselves through their writing is something that is another reason why writing and publishing is important. There's a traditional African saying that says, until the lions have their say, tales of victory will be told by the hunter. So, unless we want to leave it all to the hunter, we've got to also empower the lions to write and tell their tales. So all of that is to say that I think that although more people want to be writers than want to be publishers, I think there has to be some consideration paid to the role of the publisher and how that can be strengthened in different ways to make the work of the writer in a way more pertinent, easier. Because without a publisher, without publication, the writer is going to be writing into a vacuum without any way of getting that work into the public arena. Now,
I'm sorry, we can't hear you very well.
You can't hear? Is the mic not working? Am I not speaking into it? So nobody's heard a word I've said. Thank you. Okay. Now, does anybody want to ask me to repeat anything I've said? I mean, of those who said. Okay, well, let's get down to the business of writing. Now, as I said, I say to people, don't become a writer unless you can't not be a writer, because it's not an easy course of life. It's rewarding if you're doing it because it satisfies you, because you enjoy it, because you think you have something to say. But there's no point in writing if you only have your eye on somebody out there going to publish it for you. I mean, you have to be committed. And in fact, it's not just I once heard the difference between being involved and being committed. And to be a writer, you have to be committed. Now, I'll describe the difference between being involved and being committed. When you have an English breakfast and you have ham and eggs, well, the eggs, the hen is involved. The ham, the pig is committed. So don't go into it unless you can't help yourself. And I think in order to be a good writer, you have to be a good reader. You have to know what is out there. You know what have to know what makes a good writer. You have to be willing to improve with everything you do. You have to learn lessons from other writers. You have to maintain standards. You have to try and recognize why it is you're trying to write. And if it's simply out of a wish to become wealthy, then you probably won't achieve it, unfortunately. Some writers do have the luck to become well known, to sell many copies, but majority don't. And even those writers who have the luck to win prizes and critical acclaim don't necessarily make a lot of money. So, and yet it's a powerful profession. Knowledge is power. So it's a responsibility as well as a commitment. And we need writers. I mean, writing is a way for cultures to learn about somebody's culture. There's no better way than looking at their literature. And there are organizations such as International PEN, which are committed to helping writers survive, defending writers who have come into conflict with their societies through what they've written. And that shows you that writing actually has a powerful interface with society, with politics, with every aspect of life. So you have to try and be as good a writer as you can be. And I would have thought the first thing that anybody should do if they want to be a writer is actually look at some books, look at reference books. The first place to go perhaps is a reference book such as the Writers and Artists Yearbook, in which you will find information about publishers, about how to present manuscripts. I was talking yesterday, and I'm fortunate or unfortunate to have been on both sides of the divide. I've been a publisher and I've been a writer, or I am. And so it's a bit, I don't know whether it's poacher term gamekeeper or whatever, but I've been on both sides. And as a publisher, I know the difficulties of trying to sift through the dozens of manuscripts that come through one's letterbox every week and trying to find things that it's not just a question of them being presented right, although, as I said yesterday, there are certain jokes among publishers that you can tell if something comes in a package written in capital letters with green ink, you know it's probably from somebody who's not, slightly crazy. So so try and present things in a professional way, try and make things look as if they're readable, double space them, type them rather than handwrite them. I mean, you'd be surprised at some of the ways that we've had people have sent in their work in tiny handwriting so you can't read it, on scraps of paper, it's a chore just to get through what they're trying to say, let alone digesting and trying to find a way to make it interesting. So presentation is something you'll be told about if you take the trouble to look at some of these reference books. Now imagine you're a publisher, you're going to have, well, I don't know about what the figures are now, but there was something like over 70,000 new books published in Britain every year. New books. That's never mind all the books that already exist. And they're coming out. Those are the ones that are published. So imagine the ones that aren't published. So imagine the competition that you're up against if you submit a book to a publisher. So it's got to have something to recommend itself to the publisher in terms of what it's saying, in terms of how it's saying it, in terms of the possible readership out there. I'm not suggesting you concern yourself with the readership when you're writing, but you have to be aware when a publisher receives a book, they're not turning it down because they're being mean or whatever. Publishing is an art, a craft, and a business. And the business, certainly in Britain currently, the business part is what is actually, unfortunately, predominating, because more and more the publishing companies are conglomerates. They're a massive imprints, all owned by a large company at the top. So you send a book to one imprint, and actually you could send it to another imprint, it's still being seen by the same people. So more and more the decisions are being taken by the accounts department or the sales department rather than the editorial department. So it's a competitive business, and yet, as I keep saying, it's a rewarding business. I'm counselling both to do it and not to do it in a way, because I don't want to have a lot of disappointed people thinking it's easy, you just write something, send it off, it gets published, you become rich and famous and live happily ever after. Because that doesn't happen to many people. One of the things that can be done, and I know it's not easy, but people do, is to publish themselves. And there are different ways of this happening. I mean, when I started being a publisher, you could say, I wasn't publishing my own work, but I was starting from scratch. I didn't know what I was doing. I was very young, as was my business partner. We had no money, so we typewrote the books we were publishing on an electric typewriter. We produced them that way. We had no distribution, so we sold them ourselves in the street. We stopped people saying, do you want to buy a poetry book? So we started from where we were, and I think it is possible to start from where you are, but you still have to maintain standards. And I think perhaps nowadays with computers, it's slightly more possible to do some sort of desktop publishing, to present things in a way that is readable and acceptable to the market. But I would counsel that you have to look at what's out there, look at what's published, look at how it's published, and try and keep up the standards and do at least as well, if not better, than what is out there. We have a lot of examples. We've heard of the people who've already published books in this country, not least the minister. One of the things that I would also like to see happening more, aside from the documentary, the non-fiction books, which I think seems to be quite well represented here, is creative writing, fiction as well as non-fiction. And that is something that you have to dig deep into yourself for. And nobody can really help you with that. I mean, people can help you with editing after you've done it and so on. But you have to... I mean, recently I judged a short story competition in Britain, and among the judges, we arrived at a simple rule of thumb to eliminate things or include things for further consideration. And that is, everything has to have a compelling beginning, middle and end. There has to be a point to what you're writing. There has to be some sort of writing that grips the attention, and it has to have a structure. So I think that applies to any kind of writing, whether it's non-fiction or fiction, and you have to, therefore, study the form that you are trying to write in. If it's poetry, well, I'm sure you'll probably be interested in poetry already. And poetry is not an easy market, I have to say. It's something that a lot of people write, but it isn't very easy to get published in the established publishing community, unless you already have a name in some other sort of writing. I don't know how long I'm going to go on, but I would like to leave enough time for some feedback from the audience. I'd like to know what you would like to know about the business of writing. I mean, I could take you through the process of what happens when a manuscript is taken on, which may be of interest. Supposing I'd been submitted a manuscript which I then decided to take on, I would then contract the author, do a contract with that author. I would then work with that author on the manuscript, on editing that manuscript. I would then, there would be advance information sheets that would go out to the salespeople. There would be designers working on the jacket. The book would probably be in production 9 months before the publication. It's a bit like having a baby. The whole process probably takes about 9 months. And by the time the book is actually produced, i.e. printed, you would then have to send out the review copies to the reviewers, to the newspapers to review. And you'd have to do that in enough time for the newspaper books editors to send the book out to their potential reviewers, who then have to have time to read the book, for the review to be written and the review published. So that's normally about a month before publication. There are all sorts of other things, rights which can be sold. So you probably, in the publishing company, have a rights department, subsidiary rights department, trying to sell translation rights, or if you're lucky, film rights, but probably not, or serial rights or anthology rights. So there are numerous subsidiary rights that every publisher will hope to try and sell. But that's once you've got past the hurdle of being accepted by a publisher and being in production for publication. So those are things that I can expand on if anybody would like to know. But I would really like to have some feedback from this audience as to what are the things that you need to know about the business, about writing, about publishing, about where you're situated now, where you'd like to be situated, what you'd like to do in that area, what you've done. Has anybody got any questions to start it off? One right up here.
What are the pros and cons of self-publishing versus the inter-publishing company?
What are the
pros and cons?
The pros and cons. Well, self-publishing can be of more than one kind. I mean, you can take your manuscript and go to a printer and get it printed, and you just pay for it. There are also companies that will you can go to and will charge you money, and they will put it out. Well, they may be interested solely in your money, rather than distributing the book as widely as possible. I mean, once you've paid, there's less onus on them to push, because they've made their money. Whereas, I mean, the publisher who takes your book on in a normal sort of way, they will pay you. When you do the contract, you will get an advance. So that is a difference between, it's the difference between somebody saying, I believe in what you've done, I'm going to pay you because I believe in what you've done, and you saying, I believe in what I've done myself, I'm going to pay myself. Or take the debt on myself. So that's the difference. But there's nothing there's nothing wrong with promoting what you've written. I mean, some of the best known authors, whether or not they've been published through a publisher, have gone down that road of self-promotion in terms of everywhere they went. And Terry McMillan was one. Everywhere she went, she'd have a bag of books and be selling her own books, because sometimes you're unlucky to have enough to have a publisher who doesn't have the capacity to be everywhere you want to be. If you want to read all over the island or in other parts of the world, sometimes your publisher can't keep up with you, or doesn't know how to keep up with you. I mean, when I published my anthology, Daughters of Africa in America, I had a publisher there who wasn't convinced that there was much mileage in the black bookshops. So I remember going to a signing in a black bookshop, a small black bookshop in Brooklyn, and the publisher had sent along maybe a dozen books for sale in case anybody's interested. Well, they had to send back to the office and find every copy of the book they could find. There were queues, people were buying the book because they just didn't know that market. So you may have to help out, even if you go down the traditional road of finding a publisher. But if you believe in what you're writing and nobody else will take you on, then by all means go ahead and do it yourself. But again, as I've said, it's a question of why you're doing it. It's a question of maintaining standards, and don't be surprised if you end up with a garage full of unsold books.
If you print your book yourself, or have it printed in a very small quantity in a place that you like, how you might in a place like Bermuda, if you then subsequently try to get it published, do they sort of cancel each other out? Will you not?
It depends how well you've done. I mean, if you do it yourself, and then you can go to a publisher and say, listen, little me without any backing distribution has sold X thousand of copies, wouldn't you like? They might be impressed then. And that has happened often. But if you go and say, well, I did it myself and even my mother didn't buy it, then that's not going to play very well. So it depends. I mean, it doesn't necessarily cancel itself out, particularly if you're in an environment where that may be the only way of getting your work out there. But you have to do what you can do. And I think there is a difference in terms of internet publishing these days. I mean, that is another way of connecting with the outside world. I mean, writing is about connecting with other people. isn't it, about connecting not only within your community, but hopefully without. So perhaps there are things to be done in terms of internet publishing, I don't know, but it's not necessarily a bad thing if you publish yourself, but it's a question of making the most of that if you're then going to go and try and present that to another publisher, because you have to be able to do that in a confident way and say, I did it and I sold out my print run or whatever it was, and therefore I can't, I need somebody bigger to deal with it now or whatever. I mean, that would be a good argument. Like, I printed as many as I could handle, I sold as many as I had, and I'd like somebody bigger to help me out now.
Doctor, would you tell us something about the circulation and distribution end of your major publications?
Distribution. Well, distribution is actually key to publishing. As I said, there's no point printing a lot of books and them ending up in your warehouse or your living room or wherever. I mean, the point is to try and get the books out there. So there are companies, well, certainly in Britain there are companies that have salespeople who go around the bookshops selling to the bookshop managers, saying, this book is coming, do you want to take so many copies of this book? And that's not an easy thing, to persuade the bookshops to stock your book. And you have to have maybe networks outside wherever you live. I mean, it was mentioned that I'm a patron of this organisation called Independent Black Publishers in Britain, and that's a grouping of as it says, independent black publishers. But we're trying to make links with other publishers. For example, last year at the at the London Book Fair, we had a session with the Caribbean publishers who were there, and we're maybe going to try and network with them about distribution, or African publishers. So we're trying to make links, and I think that is one of the keys to distribution success, is try and make links outside where you are. So perhaps if there are people in Britain who might be interested in the sort of books you're publishing here, to make contact with them, or in America or wherever, and try and get the distribution in that way.
Does that also affect the kinds of material that you write? I mean, do you believe that, and again, I'm thinking about this from the context of a small island, do you think, for example, that in a place like Bermuda, the work that we might write is too specific to capture an international audience? Or do you think there's a place for it?
Not necessarily. I can't say I know enough about all the books that have been published in Bermuda or the scope of them. But I wouldn't have thought it's necessarily so. If it's a very parochial subject, obviously, or if it's something that is of interest specifically to this island, and it may be that this is where your main market is, but it doesn't mean to say there may not be a smaller market outside the island. But there may also be the sorts of writing that are the sorts that are universal, that may appeal to anybody. I mean, the point is, a publisher tries to sell to anybody, as many people as possible, So you have to explore, you have to look for outlets that may not seem obvious, that may not seem traditional. I mean, as I say, it's not even necessarily the traditional outlets in terms of book shops, because when I started, as I said, we would stop people on the street, we would knock on doors. There are publishers who've, like Bogle Louverture and New Beacon Books in London, who went around with bags of books to meetings. That's another sort of distribution, or go to churches, or there are different outlets aside from bookshops that could be places to sell books at. Somebody at the back.
Dr. Busby, I'm like two works in this program. One is a sort of factual record. So listening from me tonight, I guess I can self-publish that. The other one, I guess you call it, is entertainment writing.
Can you speak up a bit? I can't quite hear.
I've got two works in process. One is factual writing. So I think I can self-publish that, as listening to you tonight. And the second one is entertainment writing, I guess you could call it, because it's a novel. And I think I'm pretty much there. What I'm going to ask you now is two questions. Once I finish and say the end, Where do I go from there? And secondly, how do I protect my manuscript?
How do you protect it?
Well, you know, I mean, I want to just hand it out.
Protect it from whom? No, I mean publishers don't steal. By and large, publishers don't steal other people's manuscripts. I mean, you've written it; it's your copyright. I mean, if you wanted, you could put a copy of it in a safe and say. But I mean, there's not necessarily the need to do that because copyright is vested in the writer. And I know very few cases where somebody's sent a manuscript to a publisher and the publisher's run off with it. And
Writing it, what's next?
sorry.
Once I'm complete writing manuscript, what is my next step?
Well, I mean, I assume you want to find a publisher. Well, I would have thought you might have to, first of all, unless you're going to go down the route of self-publishing, which means you've got to have money to do that, then I would suggest you go to a reference book. Look in a reference book, or go to a bookshop, look at books that are published by, books that seem to be in the same area as your book, and see who's published them, and maybe get in touch with those publishers. Those are the first things to do. I mean, there's no point sending a book to a publisher, if you have a book or a novel, there's no point sending it to a publisher who only publishes, cookery books or something. You've got to know who you're sending the book to, and make sure that they're suitable for the sort of book you have in mind. And I always keep a copy of your manuscript anyway. Never send your only copy to the publisher. Always keep a copy.
What about copyright?
The process of copyright. Could you talk to the process?
Well, copyright is the initial point legally is copyright vested in the writer. And I know of very few, I can't think of any cases where I know it's a great fear of writers that they will send their manuscript, their precious life work to a publisher who will then try and pass it off as somebody else's. But I don't see why that publisher would want to do that. I mean, if they found a writer who's got something so wonderful, they'll take on that writer.
The process of copywriting.
There's no process. It's automatic. It's automatically your copyright. On the book, it'll say copyright whoever it is. It'll be copyrighted in the book to you. But there's nothing you have to do.
Register the copyright office. Register the copyright office.
You can do whatever you like, but it's not necessary. When the book is published, there will be a copy on the copyright. You have the title page, the back of the title page is the copyright page. That is the page on which it'll say this author exerts their moral right. The book is copyrighted so and so this date. That information will be on the back of whatever, all rights reserved. It'll be back on the back of the title page with the name of the copyright holder, the writer. It'll be there.
But Dr. Busby, I think what people are asking is they're concerned that once they send their manuscript out, someone will take that idea and use it. So what they're asking...
Well, it depends on what kind of an idea it is. There's no copyright in ideas.
So what I think they're asking is, or maybe what you're saying is, once someone writes something, it's automatically recognized as being copyrighted without them having to do anything.
That they're writing, yes, but you can't copyright an idea.
No, I know that.
So I mean, it's automatically your copyright. I mean, there's a difference between copyright. I suppose if you're just writing a non-fiction book, you can send it to somebody and they can say, "Oh, sorry, we don't want it. We already had the same idea." There's nothing you can do about that. You can't prove that they didn't have that idea. But if they use your words, your writing, that is infringing your copyright. But there have been times I have published books at the same time as somebody else has published a book on the same subject. I mean, there's no copyright in titles. People can have the same title as yours. There's no copyright in the title. But if they plagiarize your writing, they're infringing your copyright. I mean, if I decide to write a book on whatever it is, a breed of cats or some non-fiction subject, I can't stop anybody else doing the same thing.
Excuse me, Dr. Busby, can you speak on writing a good query letter? I think this is what the lady was asked. She's written her manuscript. What is the next step? If you can give us some techniques on writing a good query submission letter.
A good submission letter?
Yeah, if you can give some techniques on good
Well, if it's a non-fiction book, then you should always write a preliminary letter before sending the whole manuscript. You should write a summary, a synopsis, maybe half a dozen pages of an outline of the book, a breakdown of the possible chapters, and give the it may be at the most a sample chapter, because there's no point sending the whole manuscript to a publisher if they're not going to be interested. They will say if they want to see the whole manuscript. So send a submission letter, succinct, saying what it is, accompanied by a synopsis and a chapter breakdown, and any salient points to do with why this book is topical, why it should sell, what the competition is, any of those points that might make it easier for the publisher to make their decision. I mean, put yourself in the position of the publisher getting a dozen books that day. They're going to want to know what they need to know in succinct a way as possible.
So you would recommend that before writing a manuscript, they should get in contact with the publisher, find out what their guidelines are first, the submission guidelines first.
Well, if you can, first of all, to find out whether a publisher is right for you, you can go to the reference book and see what they publish, or go to a bookshop and see what they publish. They're not going to, if you have an idea for a book that you haven't yet written, then you can sound them out that way. If you've already written something of the book, and I would suggest that you write, if you're an unknown writer, they're going to want to see how you write, so they're going to want to see a sample chapter. So you should at least have a sample chapter so they can see how you write, if it's a non-fiction book, and a chapter breakdown or whatever. Because they're not going to commission a complete unknown who may not be able to write. So they need to have some idea of the structure of the book, what it covers, what the topical points are, what the saleable points are, and how you can write.
Is it recommended that you have an editor look at your manuscript prior to submitting it to a publisher?
Well, there's nothing wrong with that if you have access to one, but publishers have their own editors. I mean, one of the things that has become more and more the case, certainly in Britain, is that publishers prefer to have books that come via literary agents. And it can be as hard to find the right literary agent as to find the right publisher. But this acts as a sort of sifting mechanism, because they get so many unsolicited manuscripts that certain publishers will not look at unsolicited manuscripts. They'll look at manuscripts that come via literary agents or via somebody they know or some recommendation. That's simply to cut down the volume, because it's just impossible. I mean, when I was a publisher, we were publishing maybe 50 titles a year, and we were getting 50 titles a week. So obviously most of them are going to have to go back for whatever reason.
What are the costs that are involved in having a literary agent?
The costs involved?
Having a literary agent.
Well, the literary agent usually works on a commission, so they will take a commission, so they will try and sell your work. So if they sell your work for, whatever it is, £1,000, they will take 10%, 12.5%, 15%, whatever their commission is. It varies from agent to agent. They will take a commission on that. On sales they make for you, they'll take a commission.
Is it necessary to live in the country? So if I'm in Bermuda and I write to literary agents in the US
It's not necessary to live in the country, but I mean, you've just got to bear in mind that if you're sending a manuscript abroad, you're going to have to pay the postage. No, of course it's not necessary. You can. That's why I suggest that if it's a non-fiction, if you're writing fiction, then usually the publisher will want to see the whole thing, because it's quite hard to summarize in 6 pages what a novel is. But if you're writing non-fiction, it's perfectly acceptable to write a brief synopsis and maybe half a dozen pages about what it's about, whatever points will make the publisher interested, and send that first. And that's going to cost you less money in terms of postage, because it's not as much as, 100 pages is more expensive than 6 pages. So I would always recommend you do that. And it doesn't matter where you live, but you should always send a stamped addressed envelope or some sorts of mechanism, whether it's an international postal order or whatever, if you want your manuscript returned. If you don't want it returned, then it probably won't be, because the publisher's not going to pay out money to send back every 50 manuscripts to people who don't send the postage. So if you don't mind not having it back, don't put your postage. If you want it back, make sure you enclose a stamped addressed envelope.
What sort of things do the public want to read about?
What do the public want to read about?
Well, what sort of things sell well in the marketplace?
Well, I don't think that's the starting point. I mean, as I said, don't write if you don't have to.
Some things would be better.
But if everybody knew that, we'd all be rich. Every publisher, if everybody could predict what was going to sell, no, it's hard to say. I mean, you write what you want to write, what you feel you want to write. Now, it may be that you're lucky and you've hit the zeitgeist or whatever is going to sell, whatever is fashionable. And publishers do work according to fashion. So then it could be that Harry Potter is fashionable, so they're looking for the next Harry Potter or whatever. But they're not, that's going to dry up. You cannot always be the next Harry Potter. So if you're going to spend, I don't know, how long will it take you to write a novel? You don't want to spend a year or 2 or 3 or more writing something you don't want to write. So you're committing your time to writing something. You can't predict that anybody's going to want it at the end. And you might be wrong, you might be right, you might be lucky, but there's no point doing it because you think somebody's going to want it.
I suppose one would need to have some sort of idea of what market they wish to target. Whether you want your work to have universal appeal, or the immediate, the local.
All you can do is go to bookshops, read the newspapers, read other people. I mean, there's no shortcut to that. You see what's in the bookshops. You see what's on the bookseller lists. You see what's selling, what isn't selling. There's no magic potion. If a publisher could forecast what was going to be top of the bestseller list this time next year, they would do it, but they can't. And the publishers make things bestsellers by putting money behind them. So sometimes books are published. There's nothing wrong with them. They're wonderful books, but they don't make it. For all sorts of reasons. It could be that they come out at a time where they're competing with something else. It could be that the publisher doesn't promote them. It could be that, there are all sorts of reasons. Sometimes a book can be published and get too many reviews. I've been in a situation where I published a book, it's reviewed everywhere, and yet it didn't sell. And that's because people think they've already read it. They've read so many reviews. They think they don't need to read it. And yet I've published other books that have sold without any reviews. It's just word of mouth. Somebody has said, oh, you must read this book, it's fantastic. And so it's sold that way, without any review coverage. So it's difficult. It's almost like gambling. As you put your money on printing this book, but you don't know that it's going to actually work.
What is your opinion on print-on-demand publishing?
Sorry?
Print-on-demand publishing. Do you think
print on demand?
Whoever succeeds.
Well, that's a development that's obviously, you're probably going to go on further, and it makes it simpler to not overprint. Because one of the things about being a publisher, you have to guess how many copies to print. And that's when I first started publishing, I published poetry books. And I didn't know how many copies to print. I thought there are millions of people in this country. Poetry is important. So I ended up with 15,000 poetry books and no distribution. Well, poetry books normally sell in the hundreds. And so if you print more than you need, you then have them in your warehouse or living room. You've got to get rid of them. So that's why people called remainder merchants are in business. So they will take books off you at a reduced rate, and that's when you see in these bargain bookshops books selling at whatever it is, 25 cents or whatever, because that means probably some publishers printed too many copies, it hasn't sold, they're trying to get rid of them. So print on demand will help eliminate that thing, because they'll print as many as they need at a time.
I was wondering if there's any publishing associations that a publisher should join as a startup publishing company. A list of reviewers that you can send your startup manuscripts to.
Sorry, can you? I'm a bit hard of hearing.
Interested in being a publisher.
Oh, good.
And I was wondering if there's any lists of associations that a new startup
publisher should join to legitimize your publishing company, a list of reviewers who would accept manuscripts from new publishing houses, and any advice for e-publishing, because I'm interested in e-publishing, not having books actually physical, but e-books.
I don't know any associations that exist here, but in Britain there are associations like the Publishers Association, the Independent Publishers Guild. There are, and in the case of these black publishers group I mentioned, independent black publishers and so on. So there are groups that are there, which are more like they're there for people to share their experiences and be support. And in some cases they may join together to have stands at exhibitions or book fairs, have a joint stand for a publishers association. But another way is to contact the reference books and get yourself into the reference books, saying what it is that you're looking for, what your scope of your interests are, and so on. But there's really, you have to do it and actually, I suppose, learn as you go along. There are courses people can go on to be a publisher. There are courses in publishing. I don't know whether there are any here, but certainly in Britain there are courses, university courses in publishing that some people do go on. I don't think there are any pools of people sitting there waiting for ideas from other people. They have their own ideas if they're writers. But you might have friends who want to do that. But I think you should try it yourself. If you think the stories are so good, then try it yourself.
Having written a book, Doctor, what sort of disposition do you have for reviewers who probably give you what I might call these books diplomatic language? Yes, and I
Don't read them. What do you do to the reviewer?
Yeah, how do you do such a reviewer?
You don't deal with them. You can, what can you do? They've written the review. You're going to go and kneecap them or something? No, I mean, the point is, if you're the writer, then the best thing is probably to ignore it. If you're the publisher, you probably will wince. I mean, one of the things I always say to publishers who come to me for advice is it's very important to write a very good blurb on the cover. You know why? Because you get lazy reviewers, and what they review is the cover. They reproduce the blurb in different sorts of ways. I know this because there have been situations where a reviewer has been sent a proof copy of a book before it's finally finished, and there have been certain names in the book which have changed by the time the final version has come out, and yet the reviewer is reviewing the names that were in the proof copy. So I mean, on the blurb. So it's very important to write a good blurb if you're going to self-publish or be a publisher, because and blurb writing is an art in itself. You have to try and get in certain buzzwords. When I had an editorial assistant, I used to tell her, well, the words you've got to try and get in, if at all applicable, are new, first, only, best. This is the best. You can't say, well, this is almost as good as that book. It's one of a million other books. You have to try and say, why is this book the only this, the first that, the best that? And that will grab the attention, and that's what the reviewers will notice. And also getting the right title. I reviewed for The Guardian a book last month called Negro with a Hat. It's a book about Marcus Garvey. And so many people hated that. I hated that title. And because it was a bad title, so much attention was paid to the title that took away from what was in the book. So people spent time discussing the title rather than discussing the contents of the book. So the packaging is important, that what's on the cover is important. Again, I mean, I've had books where the cover is terrible, and reviewers spend a lot of time discussing how bad the cover is and the illustration rather than what's inside it. So the whole package has got to be right, and you've got to... I've also published books where there have been inadvertent spelling mistakes. We published a book by C.L.R. James called Notes on Dialectics, Now, on the spine, the reviewer had left a C out, so it became notes on dialectics. And there have been mistakes that you have to try and avoid if you're coming from that perspective. But if you just get an asinine reviewer, well, you can get into correspondence and write to the paper and point out where they've gone wrong and so on. But it's usually, you have to get, it's best to get somebody else to do that on your behalf, because it'll come out as sour grapes, you didn't like my book, and so just accept it. And the best plan is probably don't read the reviews if they're that bad. And sometimes you can turn it to your advantage. I remember a book we published when I was at Margaret Busby. I can't remember which book it was, but we decided, I think it might have been The Spook Who Sat by the Door. It was the first novel I published. We decided on the paperback edition to take out all the... We did an advertisement. We took out all the worst things from reviews, which actually made it sound quite interesting. You say, terrible, all the derogatory things, and you get this wonderful ads. It makes you want to read the book because it can't be that bad. So you can use bad reviews to your advantage. So,
there was a young lady, earlier who had asked about copyright sending things off to publishers, and you said that you never heard of an instance where a publisher had taken somebody's work. Mm-hmm. What about if you're sending your writing around within a community to try to get feedback before sending it off? So you're dealing with individuals versus...
Is that what happens here?
Sometimes you have writing groups, for example, where people will try to workshop, or they'll share their manuscript with a single individual and ask for feedback, or one or two individuals. Do you think that there is danger in that, or that's something that needs...
Well, I think that's a risk you're taking as a writer. If you're showing it to somebody you don't trust, then if it's that sort of an unscrupulous person, they're going to take your work and pass it off as theirs, then beware. But what you can always do is date whatever you've written, put it in this bank safe somewhere.
A witness too. Would have a witness too.
Yeah, you can take whatever measures seem. If you're that worried, then by all means take measures. But actually, I think it's probably rarer than. I mean, there've been famous cases of published writers who've been accused of plagiarism. Alex Haley was accused of plagiarism of a book by a woman called Margaret Walker, Jubilee. And sometimes it's inadvertent. I mean, you're writing, you read a book, you make notes from that book, and you go back to your notes and you forget that those aren't your words, and you somehow incorporate them in what you're writing. So I suspect that may happen, but I think it's rarer than people fear. Sorry, you had a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask, in the end, assuming that one gets a publisher, whose decision is it what the final title of the book will be? Is that left to the publisher or the author?
These things, well, normally when you sign a contract, it'll stipulate in the contract, the publisher will have whole control over the way the book is produced and so on, in consultation with the authors. And normally, any reasonable publisher will not do anything without consulting the author. So there's no point publishing a book with your name on it that you don't want to be 100% behind. So they want your cooperation, so they're not going to insist on a title that you hate. You might then go on strike saying, well, I'm not going to promote it or something. So, I mean, any reasonable publisher will not do anything without the author's consent. And normally you can, if you're entering into a contract with a publisher, you can stipulate whatever you want. I mean, they may not agree. You can say, I don't want you to do X, or I want to be informed before you do Y, or, I want to have veto on the cover illustration. You can try all those things. They may not agree, but I mean, the very least they can say, we won't do anything without consulting you.
What size of advance in royalty is usually offered for the first time?
Sorry?
What size of advance in royalty offered for the first time?
What size of advance in royalties? How long is a piece of string? Well, royalties are more standardized. The traditional royalty for a hardback edition is 10% starting royalty, which rises after a certain number of copies sold, like 2.5 copies, it might rise to 12.5%, and so on, 15%. Paperback royalties usually start at about 7.5% and rise again, with more copies sold. But it can vary depending on what the format is, what the publisher agrees to, what the writer agrees to, and also the advance is always against royalties. So that if the publisher gives you an advance of £100, that doesn't mean it's all you're going to get. It means you'll get that will come off the first. If your royalty is 10%, then the first £100 off the sales will be covered by that royalty, then you'll get more money. Whereas, if some publishers who woo really famous authors pay over the odds, so they might pay £1 million and they'll never earn that back. But they want to hook that writer. But it's very rare that you'll get a huge advance if you're a first-time writer, unless you're very lucky. And it depends on how wealthy the publisher is, how badly they want your book. And things like that. There's no standard size of advance, but the royalties are pretty standard. Sorry?
Bidding wars.
What?
Bidding wars.
Bidding wars. You mean between publishers? Well, publishers will enter into bidding wars if there's a hot writer there they want to. But you should be so lucky to have more than one publisher bidding for your book. If it were a writer like Zadie Smith or somebody who's currently top of the bestseller list, and or somebody whose last book was extraordinarily successful, then publishers might try or whatever. But it's very rare that. If you have a good agent may hype things up so that they send manuscript to more than one publisher and say we're closing the bidding on next Friday and we want your bids in, and hope that they'll get a bidding war going. It's not that common for somebody who is unknown or a first-time writer or writing something that is fairly. It has to have. If you were writing some sensational story that nobody else had and everybody wanted, fine, you might get into that situation. If it's not got that sort of appeal, then it doesn't happen as often as you read about the things. You read about it when it happens because it's a big deal, but it doesn't happen that often, unfortunately.
Is it? If you don't have a literary agent, you're working on your own, sending out your manuscript, is there any problem sending your manuscript out to more than one publisher at a time, or do you have to wait to get a response?
Well, first of all, it's if you send it to more than one publisher, the protocol is you should tell them you're doing that. And if you tell them you're doing that, they may be less interested. But if you don't tell them, then you could be wasting their time, because you send it to 6 publishers, one of them takes it up, you're going to piss off, the other 5, you're going to say, well, I spent all this time reading it, and now you're telling me you've taken it away. So, the protocol is to be honest. But a lot of people I know probably aren't honest. But again, if you're not going through an agent, you may not even get that far. They may just, send it straight back. It's hard. Another thing people should try and do is become agents, perhaps, because there's a dearth of agents who understand a certain sort of multicultural writing. I've been in situations where a writer friend of mine is called Andrea Levy. Andrea Levy. And I was around Andrea when she was trying to get her first novel published. She was trying to get an agent. And she told me she was always being asked whether she'd done anything illegal or famous. Because that would be a good backstory. Rather than saying, here is a good book, you could say, and the author has just come out of jail. And so there comes a feature story in it, or, the author, murdered their dog, or mother, or whatever, or what used to be a drug addict. And there's some backstory that can be, hyped up. or the author is 2.5, and whatever.
Might it make sense to in your significant letter, the first letter you send out with the idea that you've done just one chapter, rather than sit down and write the whole book? Nobody's interested I know you said do things that you're passionate about, but if you really want to get this book sold, if you're going to spend a whole year.
No, if you're writing non-fiction, I suggest that you, because unless you're a known quantity, unless you've already published things and they know your writing style, they're going to want to see at least a chapter to see how you write. So that doesn't mean you've got to have written the whole book, but you've got to at least demonstrate that you can write. I mean, if you have a wonderful idea and you send in some illiterate page or two, they're not going to be interested.
Yeah, I understand that. I get that point, but I'm saying you don't actually have to finish the book. Send them.
No, send a chapter. That's what I'm saying. Send a breakdown of what the chapters will be, an outline of what the book will be, and if you're lucky, if they're interested in that, they will commission the whole book. But they need to see some evidence that you can write. Therefore, a specimen chapter or two. I mean, just something. I'm not saying write, if the book is going to be 200 pages, send them 200 pages, but send them 20 pages to show that you can write.
Have you commissioned any writer in your experience?
Have I commissioned any writers? Yeah, I have, yeah. Some more successfully than others. I remember once commissioning somebody to write a book on rum and giving them an advance of probably £100. They went off and drank themselves to death. You win some, you lose some.
Yes. Can I just ask you a question of curiosity? If you submit a chapter for the publisher to read, and the publisher says, okay, that's pretty good, I'd like you to. So is there like a sort of like reasonable amount of time he expects the completed book?
Publishers are notoriously slow in replying to submissions, whether you submit. I mean, some publishers are good, some publishers are terrible. That you'll send them a manuscript, you will wait, and you will wait, and you will wait. And you have to be patient. I mean, you can write to them, but I'll tell you what normally happens. If you write to a publisher nagging, they will just send it back.
No, what I mean is if you submit that one chapter and says, yes, I'm interested, is there an amount of time he expects you to send the complete book?
No, he will tell you if he wants to. If he will tell you, he will say, yes, I'm interested in this book. I will commission this book. When can you write it, or how long will it take? If he's interested, or he or she or they are interested, then you begin the dialogue. You're in dialogue with them, so you can say whether it's going to take me. I can deliver it in 2 years, 1 year, 6 months, never, whatever. And that's a discussion you have with the writer, with a publisher, and that will be in the contract. It'll say this book will be delivered within X months or whatever. It'll be stipulated in the contract. And you can always go back to the publisher and say, listen, I know we said whatever, can we change it? Once you're in communication with a publisher who wants your work, then you can discuss and things are possible.
By and large, do you think that for a new writer, let's say your book has generated interest with a particular publisher, do you think that first-time writers or first-time people being published run any kind of risk of being exploited by the publisher? I mean, do you really have to know the ins and outs of the business to not be taken advantage of as far as advances in royalties?
Well, that's where an agent comes in, and it's once you've got a publisher, you will find an agent. I mean, I have had friends who had difficulty finding an agent. A publisher takes them on, they phone up an agent. Once they say, I've got a publisher, fine, the agent will come on board. Then the agent will deal with the contractual details. So if you're lucky enough to find a publisher who wants your work, then you'll probably have no difficulty finding an agent. And the agent will do the negotiation on your behalf, check the contract. And there are writers' organisations you can join as well. Some of them have different criteria for joining, but there are writers such as the Society of Authors or the Writers Guild. You can get in touch with them for advice if you join, and they will vet contracts for you if you're a member, or give you. They have pamphlets on different sorts of agreements. So there are writer-based organisations that can help you.
Doctor, a manuscript arrives at your publishing company. What happens upon receipt? What's the process?
What happens?
Editor or editors or?
There are usually, well, I don't know about publishing companies in general, but there's usually somebody whose job it is to initially sift the manuscript. There's unsolicited manuscripts are in what goes into what's called the slush pile. So it can be a more junior editorial person whose job it is to sift through the slush pile. If it's a manuscript coming from an agent, the agent will probably know, the senior editor will be writing, dear Fred, dear Jay, directly to that person, so that person will then read that manuscript. Which is why it's important to have contacts or an agent who knows those editors, because it's a shortcut. It doesn't. Otherwise, it goes into slush fund pile, and it's sort of, who knows whether it'll get picked out of there. A lot of good things come out of the slush pile, whether it's a matter of luck whether somebody picks it out. Whereas if some known agent writes to their buddy, the editor, saying, you really got to read this person, Ira Phillip, he's really wonderful, and I want your reply by next Wednesday, they'll probably pay more attention to it.
Would it be improper to send a manuscript to more than one publisher at one time?
Well, we had that question. I think the protocol is that you shouldn't necessarily do that. And the protocol is you should say that if you're going to send to more than one publisher at the same time, you should let them know you're doing that. If you don't, well, be it on your own hand. You can be discreet and not do it, but sometimes if you want to save time, because as I said, publishers can be slow in responding, you may want to take that chance. But it's not deemed to be the right thing to do without telling them anyway. Oh, somebody who hasn't asked a question. How about that? Sorry? Can you speak up a bit?
Music. Anything about the publishing and distribution of music?
Music?
Yes.
Publishers who operates in, I assume, different ways. I have no particular expertise on music publishing, but again, I think if you go to the reference books, they will be listed, so you'll be able to find the publishers who. If you're talking about publishing music as opposed to books about music. Yeah, so I would go to one of the reference books and look for music publishers who. They may have their own protocol, but I'm not really expert on that field.
Can I just clarify? Did you say a reference book is the writers and artists
yearbook? That's a standard reference book that people refer to. There are probably many others now. There are lots of reference books. There are lots of books out there telling you how to write different sorts of writing. In fact, my company, Margaret Busby, has a series called The Writer's Guide, so you can get books on the craft of novel writing, how to write short stories, how to write this, even books on how to publish yourself. So there are how-to books there. There are lots of them. You can probably go on the internet and just look up how to something, and you'll find there's a book on it.
As a publisher, how difficult is it for you to get books into maybe bringing up a lot more smaller bookstores, which very many, but in the U.S., I'm thinking of the big ones like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and Borders. Is it difficult for you as a small publisher to get them to do your books?
If you're a small publisher,
right? For these big booksellers, they can
Well, I mean, it depends. I mean, I'll tell you one thing that's happening in bookselling in Britain these days is that the chains of bookshops like Waterstones and W.H. Smith's, they charge the publishers to display books. So if you're a big publisher, they're going to charge you £30,000 or whatever to have your books on their table. So the small publishers obviously can't afford that. So, that is happening more and more, and that's because the publishing industry is becoming more and more corporate and conglomerate. They can afford that, to them to get their books in those prime positions. They can afford to pay, but a small publisher who doesn't have that budget can't afford to pay. So it's a question of perhaps finding non-traditional means of getting out there. But it is a disadvantage to have not to have much money as a small publisher, but it can be that you can find other strategies to get over that. It is true that money these days is well, you are disadvantaged if you don't have much of it, as we all know. I don't know who should I go with next? Okay, you. What people also, publishers are also, who have their own websites, can also sell their own books through their website. So that's happening quite a bit. I have friends who are publishers, small publishers, who have their websites, who do a lot of sales through the internet in that way. So that's another avenue. I'll have one here, then one at the back.
This is a requirement, for example, for a self-publisher to have an ISBN number and barcodes on their products.
I think ISBNs will make your life easier, because that's a lot of people order by ISBN,
ISBN numbers you can actually get from our local library. There's a form that you can
Okay. I'll send you at the back, then I'll come over this side again.
So when you're working with the graphic designers on the book covers, do they retain their copyrights in the design of this book, or is that
Depends on what you agree with them. If you're dealing with them in that way, then you can make the agreement. Depending on you both got to agree. And sometimes on covers you may be using an illustration from somewhere else. I've published books where I've used, like Wilfredo Lam, or gone to a museum and you pay a copyright fee to use that illustration in a certain way. So it depends on the licensing agreement.
What's about the average payment for a graphic designer? Are they salaried or independent contractors? What is that in there?
I don't think it's possible to say an average. It's always possible to go on the internet and find sites. For example, the National Union of Journalists, you can find standard rates for pay for different kinds of work, whether it's textual work or graphic work or whatever. So you can find standard rates which are based on actual payments that people have received. But it depends on what you agree with the designer.
What was that
The National Union of Journalists, which has you can find the stand. You can have I can't remember what it's called, but there's a page that gives you, fees, average fees, sort of thing. Yeah.
Of the books that you publish each year as a publisher, what percentage would you say actually make money and turn a profit to the company versus does you take a risk on?
What percentage make money? I don't know. Well, when I was publishing, it was always a juggling act. There were some things you published, because you believed in them, because they're important politically or whatever, but you knew very well they were not necessarily going to make money. And there are other things you publish thinking, well, this book is probably going to make money. It may not, I may not want to be associated with it for the rest of my life, but I know it's going to subsidize these other books. And so, there were books that we published. I remember one book we published that we knew we were publishing it, not because we thought it was a wonderful life-saving book or anything. I shouldn't mention the author's name, but it was an astrology book. And it just went on and on and on. It subsidized a lot of other books, but it wasn't, it's not a book I'm going to be proud to have on my gravestone as having published or anything. It was a book that served its purpose, that was perfectly adequate, but not, and it subsidized a lot of other books which won prizes and got critical acclaim, but didn't make very much money. And some books are like that. And sometimes it may be that you nurture an author and you publish several books by that author, and they don't make money and they don't break through until somewhere further down the line. So, they may win the Nobel Prize eventually, but it may not be with their first book or their second book or their third book. The writer such as Wilson Harris, who's published by Faber, and he has, I'm sure they don't sell many copies, but I'm sure they're hanging in there because they hope he'll win the Nobel Prize. I hope he'll win it too, but he's not a best-selling writer in their terms, and there are many writers like that. Wonderful writers, critical acclaim, not great sales. What qualities?
What makes a good book?
What makes a good book? That's it's a very subjective thing. You could find. It's impossible to say. It's just why you find many books are turned down by many publishers, and then somebody takes it on and makes a success of it. So an editor might read a book and think, I don't connect with this, I don't want to publish it. Another editor might think, gosh, I know how I'm going to publish this. It's the same book. If you don't know as a publisher how you're going to publish it, it's not the right book for you. And you have to worry about the books you publish, not the ones that get away. So it's a question of connecting that writing with the editor who's going to respond to it and therefore publish it in the right way. But it's again, if it were easy to say what makes a good book, apart from applying the standards of what makes good writing, which you will find by reading good books, buying those how-to books. Even if you buy all those how-to-write books, you have to know the rules before you can break them. You don't have to stick to the rules. You can know what the conventions are and then decide you want to discard them. But there's got to be. I've been in a position quite often where I've had manuscripts from writers who've obviously been to creative writing classes or whatever, written these perfectly turned out, wonderfully. You can't fault them, and yet there's been no connection. You read the book and you think, well, so what? And I can't say this is a bad book. I just didn't connect with it. And there've been other books that have been quite raw sometimes, but there's been something there, and you think, well, this is a writer I want to nurture. This is a writer I think has got something to say, and you might, there've been writers I've worked with in that way. So it's again a subjective thing, and it is a bit of a lottery sometimes. The right editor and the right book meeting. One hopes it happens a lot, but it doesn't always happen.
Do you have any experience with children?
Mm-hmm. In what way?
Any advice you'd like to be able to share? Nothing necessarily specific, but your children. Not so much factual, but creative.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are children's books, children's book writers. A good friend of mine is a Canadian-born woman called Verna Wilkins, who started a company called Tamarind Books. It's about 20 years ago now, and she was pioneering sort of multicultural children's books, publishing books in which children of colour were just there, not in any sort of spectacular way. I mean, she had a black tooth fairy. Why not? And in fact, her company is now part of Random House. She's still the publisher there. But, it's a question of looking at the sort of books that you think yours might sit alongside and go with those publishers. I would recommend, if you're a children's book writer, send stuff to Verna, Tamarind Books. Any more questions? Oh, there's another one here.
Could you talk a little bit about script writing?
Script writing.
Do you publish scripts?
I've written scripts because I've done theatrical work for radio and the stage. Again, it's hard to sum up how to do it. I mean, the best thing, if you want to know the techniques and whatever, is to go to a how-to book. But it's a different skill because you're dealing. Well, I remember the first time I did a radio script. And I was sitting there at my typewriter on my computer, and I'm thinking, well, this is for the radio. I better have some sound effects. So I thought, okay, a dog barks. So you have to be, if you're doing a script for something visual, then you have to be aware of that dimension. Now when I did that, I was very, very surprised. I was there when it was recorded, and suddenly they were taking all these things literally. I sort of said, a clock chimes 12, and they were doing it literally, and I was just thinking, well, I better put in some sound effects. That's when I began. So, I mean, you have to just remember the medium you're writing for, and go and look at a book, look at published scripts, look at how it's done, and keep practicing. How are we doing? Any more? Are we done?
One question? Yes.
Okay.
Illustrations. Is there somewhere you can go to get illustrations?
To get illustrations for a book you've written? You mean?
If you're planning on writing a book, you will need illustrations for it.
Well, that's normally the publisher's territory. So if you submit something that needs illustration, they will probably have a stable of illustrators. I mean, it's not to stop you having your own illustrator. If you work with an illustrator or do your own illustrations, then you can come as a package. But publishers will normally have their own people they've worked with before, or they can go to, or it fits their style or whatever. So I would concentrate on the writing.
How would you encourage a student, perhaps in their last year of school, that wants to be a writer or a reporter, perhaps an average student that may struggle with maths, other community colleges in the UK, etc., but their passion is definitely writing?
Well, I would encourage them to read. I think reading good books, seeing how other people have done it, is one of the best ways to become a good writer.
What about writing as a career?
Well, as a career, I mean, as I said, there are very few people who make a living out of writing alone. Most writers start out writing alongside doing whatever other job they do. And it's precarious, so I wouldn't encourage somebody to think that they can write alone. I mean, I would encourage somebody to write every day, to find some time in every day to write. I think that is important. I mean, I've published writers I've published a writer called Buchia Macheta. She was a single mother. She lived in a council flat. She had 5 children, young children. She lived, she had a full-time job, and she was bringing up these children. And she would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning every day to write for a couple of hours. And she's now a famous writer. I published many books of her, and she went on, and she was dedicated to writing. She believed in herself, so she made that time. So she didn't, she had a full-time job. She now can live off her writing, but she didn't start out thinking, it's my career.
So there are no schools that they can get.
They can. People can go to creative writing classes, to go to schools or whatever. But it's not necessarily going to be a way to earn a living straight away. So, I mean, they certainly get all the skills, go on the courses, read other writers. No, there are courses. If people are committed enough to want to take a course, then let them enroll in the course and do that. But I think they should be aware that it's difficult, and they won't necessarily be able to earn a living out of their writing straight away. So, they should have some other potential way of earning a living.
I think that was the last question. Someone's going to think. Before the formal thank you by Dr. Disma, I'd just like to make a few announcements. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge our MC tonight, the Senior Cultural Officer. This is Heather Whelan, who ensured that this was put together. And the main project officer in the ministry was for organizing all of this with the Bermuda College was Dr. Kim Disma Robinson, our folk life officer. Stand up so people know who you are. These are the sort of people you'll have to contact in culture. The Bermuda Library, of which I'm the minister, the head librarian, Joanne Brangman, has available for you books on agents, publishers, how-to books, and of course mentioned tonight was the use of the internet. A sheet should have come around this evening asking you for your name, address, email, and there is an evaluation sheet at the end that we would like for you to complete. The ministry has as a goal that I've established the publication. This was when I was first Minister of Culture. I had a year's break in 2003. We do have a goal of publishing 3 books. And when I was reappointed in 2007, we're looking at our own publishing house. So if you are the person to send us in a name for that publishing house, you get the opportunity to go out to dinner with the minister. And my last is a personal request. If you know anything about local music, I have over 100 pictures of local musicians, so I don't have names. I will be at the BRU tomorrow from 10 to 5. If you know something about local musicians and can come along and put a name to the pictures. At this time, I would like to ask Dr. Kim Disma Robinson, our folk life officer, to come forward with the thanks to our guest speaker.
Thank you, Minister Butler. Well, I thought that writing was very glamorous. I thought it's something that if I pursued and really worked hard at, it's something that maybe one day, not that I want to quit my job, but that I could become really wealthy. And perhaps it may be this is a quick road to fame. I think part of what we've heard from Dr. Busby tonight is that these things are all possible. However, it is not necessarily probable. And that one of the things that we have to keep in mind with this writing business is precisely that, the love of writing and the desire to have our stories told. As Bermudians and as a small community, that has so many wonderful stories like the gentleman in the back mentioned, I think that this is something that's very important not to lose sight of. And that as part of this process, the process of actually getting your writing out there and having your writing published, one of the things that we should think about is how is it that we can make who we are more visible, not only to each other and ourselves, but to the world. So I would like to encourage you to keep that in mind through this process. I appreciate Dr. Busby for being here, for helping to debunk some of the myths about writing and publishing, for offering a reality of the actual industry, which is so important, I think, for many of us who don't have access to that world. We very much appreciate your expertise, your insights, and the wealth of knowledge and experience that you've brought to us, which is evident not only from your very impressive biography, but also from the ease with which you were able to answer all of the questions that were brought to you. On behalf of the Department of Community and Cultural Affairs, as well as the community of writers, I want to thank you very much for being here and for sharing with us. I would also like to thank Minister Butler, Heather Whalen, the Senior Community and Cultural Affairs Officer, Kat Carr, who is with our department, and Angela Berry, who has assisted with the organization of this, as well as Bermuda College. Again, I'm very pleased to see such a wonderful turnout for this. I think that it gives a strong indication for our department as far as where the interest lies and what sort of work we have to do. And keeping that in mind, as the minister mentioned, we do have surveys, evaluation forms available that if you can take a few minutes, we'd like for you to complete so we can also think about other programs that may assist you in ways that we can continue this conversation in this process. So thank you once again. We also have some refreshments in the back, and please enjoy. And thank you once again to Dr. Margaret Busby.